Hey guys, welcome to Finish Awesome Friday. Today we discuss part 2 of the second layer of Awesome. Okay, so this is your structural stage. What we're going to go into today is a bit more in detail of the third element of the three we discussed in the last video. Okay, so the first one was dynamic mobility. The good thing about incorporating now more dynamic work is it's great to throw into warm-ups, great to throw into sort of workouts you do just generally at home, or if you're traveling away. It's a much sort of better sort of way to do your mobility work because you can flow into one movement to the next. It just feels more athletic and obviously, as I say, just enhances how your body feels going into those movements. So that's something, an element we look to bring into it. The second thing was obviously talking about the 3 energy pathways. Now what we're going to discuss today is a bit more detail about how you use those energy pathways to manipulate your training to get the effect that you want. Okay, so the 3 systems, you had the creatine phosphagen system, okay, which is your short, powerful, explosive, strength-based work. That in there you have your anaerobic system, which is then your high intensity but that sort of mid-range effort in terms of length of time. So you're talking about, as I say, 6 to 15 reps on weighted movements, and around about 30 to 2 minutes in terms of cardio or in terms of endurance-based exercises you're doing. And then you have the aerobic pathway or the oxidative pathway, which is then your slow, longer distance endurance-based stuff. So anything up to about 20 plus reps on weighted exercises, and then you're talking anything over sort of 2.5 minutes in terms of cardio or endurance-based stuff. Okay, so that gives you your 3 main elements. What we're going to discuss today is just looking at particular goals that people have, the sort of the main goals that people have, and how you manipulate your training to get the best effect out of it. Okay, so the way it structures, okay, though these numbers aren't final and they're not the be all and end all, these are a good sort of general structure to sort of work from. Okay, and I'll try and explain each one individually and go through each one how we would structure that. Okay, so the 4 goals I've kind of set up. The main one, number 1, is going to be general fitness and fat loss. Okay, so most people when they come for fat loss, what they're actually looking for is general fitness because they lack the work capacity, they lack the consistency of what they're doing, and 9 times out of 10 for fat loss is more of a nutritional goal. It's not necessarily an actual training goal. A training goal should be to cause an effect to the body, heightening your metabolic rate so that you can burn more fat as fuel, or your body doesn't feel the need to hold on to as much fat for fuel anymore because you're utilizing energy. So fat loss generally is a nutritional goal. It's not necessarily a training goal, but it is a general goal of people. But most people want to get generally fitter. Okay, so what we look at there, okay, is more balance in your training. The other goals, you've got strength, muscle, and endurance. Okay, generally they're the 3 elements of training that most people will fall into if they're not just looking to get fitter and stronger and generally just all round better. Okay, so the breakdown of it is nice and simple. So for general fitness, okay, this wants to be the most balanced you can be. Okay, now I've put 30, 40, 30 in the split, but it could well be a 33.33333 split from there. Okay, so literally a third of your time spent in all the elements. Okay, the reason I put more of an emphasis on anaerobic than anything else, and you'll notice that through their anaerobic capacity is never something we look to drop lower than say 20%, is because your anaerobic pathway is probably the best one to get that effect that you want. Okay, if you spend a majority of your time there, you're producing the lactic acid, which is obviously then producing all those hormones, that growth hormone, and sort of turning the body almost into that fat burning furnace we want, that raise of metabolism that we want from there. Okay, so I would say if you're going to emphasize any 3, then anaerobic will be what you want to do. But a third of your time should be spent in most areas. Okay, so you're looking at a third of your training being strength and power based, so things like your main strength lifts, your squats, your pushes, and your pulls. Okay, you're looking at power lifts, but not necessarily Olympic lifts or dynamic effort work or anything like that, which I'll explain in the next phase. But you're just looking to be explosive, so it might be med ball throws, slams, rope slams from there, box jumps if you're feeling confident enough to do that, squat jumps, broad jumps, anything that's going to get you explosive and moving the body as explosive as you can. That's a third of your training. Okay. The second third will then be anaerobic, so that's where you're going to be looking at doing more muscle-based stuff. So things like I say in the 6 to 12 rep range, weighted exercises, or sprinting, bike sprints, rows, battle ropes, any sort of crawling or moving for around about 20 to 40 seconds is going to be around that marker as well, up to about 2 minutes as I said, but you generally be around that marker, and that's that effect you're going to get from there. And then about 30% of your time in that aerobic pathway, so that's going to be your longer based running, rowing, cycling, swimming, anything that's going to work that sort of energy pathway and keep you going for a longer period of time. Obviously with weights, you're then looking at anything from about 15 to 50 reps, or whatever it's going to be of continuous work that's going to work that endurance in the muscle. Okay, so simple as that. So for general fitness, that is how you want to spread your time. You want to have a third or an equal amount of time spent in each zone. Okay. When we move on to strength, now their strength is going to be a bit more of a specialist thing, but some people, they start weight training and they think, actually, I'm really enjoying this. I want to start really pushing my strength now and start seeing how far I can go. So the general consensus of that is obviously the thing that's going to suffer the most, the thing that's going to be the complete opposite of the spectrum in terms of strength is going to be your endurance. Okay, so if you want to get stronger, obviously you want to spend less time in that endurance zone. You don't need to spend much time in the aerobic thing. But as I said in the last video, you always want to work all three pathways. You never want to dismiss any of them, because that is where you then start going backwards, in my opinion, in terms of your training. Okay, so the aerobic pathway is going to be done for 10% of the time. So that'll probably only be 2, maybe 3 sessions in a month cycle of training that you would throw in something that's going to be a bit more aerobic. Okay, either higher rep based weight work, or what I would prefer people to do is just a bit of sort of aerobic capacity work. So maybe, as I say, a bit of a longer distance row, or something low impact that's just going to work the heart and lungs, but not going to eat away too much in your strength gains. Okay, so that is generally the way you go. You could argue you could actually raise that up a bit more and lower something else, but that's generally where it's going to be. Your anaerobic pathway is still going to be around about 40%. Okay, you still want to spend the majority of your time with that zone. Okay, that's going to be where you're going to build muscles, obviously, to help with your strength lift. So if you, for example, want to improve your overhead press, then you know that your shoulders, your triceps, and maybe pectoral muscles as well will need to be built to sort of help with that strength for your press. Okay, so the anaerobic pathway is still trained a good chunk of the time. And obviously, the majority of your work you want to spend up here. Okay, you want to be explosive, you want to be strong, then you need to spend a lot of time doing those things. Okay, spending a lot of time in those rep zones, in the sort of the lower rep end of the weight system, and spending a lot of time with the lifts. Okay, as I say, these numbers aren't the final numbers, but that gives you an idea of how your training should be set up. Majority of it should be spent, working from the 1 to 6 rep range, sort of building that strength and building that foundation. You should then spend, the 40 to 50% of the time building muscles, and then a little bit of time just working on that lung capacity and, the endurance of that muscle. Okay. When we go to muscles now, obviously, some guys, the holidays are coming, they just want to get a pump on, they want to get bigger arms, bigger shoulders, bigger chests, they want their abs to come through. So what we want to be doing here is really just twisting how we do things. Now we want to work a little bit more on the aerobic capacity, because we don't want to become just big fat blobs, okay? And we don't want to, to suffer. When you're going for muscle or strength, generally your calories are going to be on a surplus. You're going to be eating more calories than you're working off, because you want to gain size, you want to build strength, okay? So you want to make sure that the mass that you build is as much lean muscle as you can, and to help that, having that aerobic capacity at a high level, so at 20%, as I've said on here, just gives you a bit more time to, for the body to realise that it's not just going to, pack on as much weight as it can. It still needs to be functional. It still needs to move. So it gives it that opportunity to do so. Okay, but still, it's not that high, because obviously we want to build that muscle. Power and strength, that creatine phosphagen sort of system, around about 30% of the time you want to spend it on there. So you still want to do a lot of your strength work in that zone, but the majority, 50%, I would say, would be around that marker for building muscle. So you do a lot more mid-range repetition work, a lot more accessory work, and looking to build the muscles up from there. Okay, you want to be working in that middle range as much as possible. And then finally, endurance. Okay, so if your goal, as I say, is to work on up to say 5Ks or 10Ks or half marathons, or even up to a marathon or a triathlon, okay, this is the zone or the area that you would obviously want to spend most of your time in. So for that, 50% of your time should be spent obviously doing what it needs to be done, improving your aerobic energy systems. Okay, so you want to be spending more time running, spending more time rowing, spending more time on your bike, for longer periods of time. Okay, so you want to work that aerobic capacity as much as possible. Up to 50%, I would say, would be a good marker to aim for. You know, majority of your training weeks should be spent building that endurance, but you can't dismiss the rest of it. Now, this is the one stage where I'd actually say your anaerobic work could come down a little bit. Okay, so you come down to around about 20 to 30%. As I say, you can mess with the numbers a bit, but it's generally going to be this way. Okay, you don't want to become weak, you don't want to lose muscle mass to a massive degree. Okay, so you would spend a bit more time in these zones doing things that are going to keep you as big and as strong as you can, whilst improving that aerobic capacity. That should be your main focus, obviously, improving your 10K, improving your 5K, improving your marathon time, whatever it's going to be. But then you need to spend some time in these other zones. So strength work will generally be very basic. So you would probably just do a pull, a push and a squat through the week. That would cover your strength base. You know, keeping it from the 3 to 5 rep range would mean that you're keeping strength. You don't necessarily need to go anywhere near the sort of 1 rep max work or anything like that. You just need to maintain and keep that strength there. 20%, you could swap these around probably, but about 20-30% of the time you want to be anaerobic pathway. You might want to still do things like shuttle sprints and sort of hill runs and things like that. They're going to be more anaerobic in nature. So that's where you could probably, this is where it gets a bit blurry, but you could probably drop a little bit of each side and do a bit more anaerobic work in terms of your capacity. But you don't want to spend too much time on it or worrying about it. So that anaerobic work will be slightly different to the anaerobic work if you were, say, building muscle. Okay, so this is, again, it's just the pathway, energy pathways we'll talk about today, but that's generally where you're looking to work most of the time. And then, yeah, so that is your endurance. So you know, still do power work, still do strength work. That will retain muscle as well. So, you know, that will take care of a lot of the worries of dropping muscle mass. If you're still lifting heavy or as heavy as you can, then that shouldn't affect too much of anything else. You spend more of the time in that aerobic zone. Okay, guys. So, as I say, it's not the exact science, but it just gives you a general idea of where your training needs to be and how we manipulate it here at UP Performance depending on the goals. Okay, we look at the goal that you have, and then we can change your training to kind of ensure that you're going to get the best or the biggest benefit from it. Okay, guys. So hopefully that's not too mental and it wasn't too boring, but it just gives you a general base idea. If you're interested in start getting into that next stage of your programming and going into that periodizational side, you can start seeing the effects of how things can be done. Okay, so on the next video, the third layout, the final layout of Awesome, the peak, obviously what we're going to look at is a bit more into the details in terms of methods that you can use and sort of ways of manipulating these even further, and then how the periodization structure will work and actually how you plan your microcycles, your macrocycles, and obviously the whole yearly plan that you're going to do. Okay, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions that you have for me, just let me know. Just be awesome. I'll see you guys soon. Catch you later.